So, I hope you're not tired.
Yeah. This good is ra. So she paid.
Are you able to follow along with the discussions? And do you find them helpful? Yes, yes.
Yeah. Ani theodo ina tina diwara.
So maybe at this point, if you have any questions,
Yeah.
In verse 21, you're saying turning away immediately from those things which bring desire and attachment. And then in verse 27, they use the source of harm as a priceless treasure, so they were turning towards it. And I was wondering why there is a difference in verse 21 of turning away from things where you can also learn from, like desire and attachment and things. And in verse 27, they do the opposite.
the koi chua de dir nganzo tanda sholiga nishu tsaji jira. Tina la ani de bada chaba ra. Chewar jube yute dale ani dogore lan sungu dos ra. Yang nishu tsadun ba jira. Tina ani nutse la ra. Nutse chungwe ne ra. Nutse chungwe ne ra. Ani tedala ani
Ale tsileng nyansle ra.
Nyansulang
Nela
gore la
gewe longchu ndebi jese namus nechi tangchi renchin terda. Ra, re.
Ta tila yunde zamba chigla ra. Ani chaba da dochachi se yula pa dogore sung ras ra. China la nutsela soba ani yang kharsa
Renchin terna
chebo zingore sung godas. Ta samlo chi tona ani dochaso chesa gi yuti as ra. Nutse chesa gi yuji chagi ro as. Chigna la ani dogore sung goya ra. Chigna la ani chebar zingore sung goya di tis genda da.
Genda da. Re. Tanda digala ndebe ndene chesa chi kanla shancha chewi ngobo namsu ngobo la zed zla gora. Ngobo na tela da chesa ngazo jinong chi ngazo chashin chesa yudu papang gore la ra. Ni sa chingna la. Ni sa na la kala na gewe longchu ndebe jese la asra de dendewe gewe longchu ndege jese shanju semba de nöji tamche renchen terdan song la ra. 소소래 누바 치긴다 딘데위 가서 치기 딜라다 게웨 롱치 ndebe jesele de gewe ge longje ndebe de sanje taba da tanje chembe goma tabar ndebe kansa de zola ra tende jese shanju semba de zo karla na phagele nöje de zo zoba gomsa yu chagora modi chini 콘졸을 츠는도 자신도 쓸랭 거 잡아째 들러 오마다 드주 가르잖아 먼저 접어 공서 유치하고래서 접어 공서 유치하디가라 접에 파식이 유치하디가라 니 접에 냠내 제색이 떼와지 와 딘데 인상 아니 딘데 왜 뇌지 당지를 먼저 변에 콘트롤면에 접어서라 곰래야 콘트롤 제색이 시들랑한데 님부터는 접어 곰마래마도 난디지 소소라지게 다도 근데 개구지면은 아주버 공기는 깔리 가버라 제상 딘데기 벽에 유두들이야 자신집이 된단 말이야 유두도 가르려는 이 접어 공색이 유 아니 저도 좀 맛있어요 라
So now when you point this out, it is important to understand that when it says in verse number 21 to turn away immediately from those things that which bring desire and attachment. Herein, it refers to objects of attachment. So the practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to turn away immediately from the objects of attachment, objects of desire and attachment, things that we become attached to, people that we become attached to turn away from these objects of attachment. Now in the other verse 27, when it says sources, potential source of harm, sources of harm herein refers to objects of aversion, objects of anger. So the objects of anger, as opposed to the objects of attachment, must be cherished, because these objects of anger are the perfect objects of forbearance, of perfect objects to cultivate forbearance. So the practice of all the bodhisattvas is to cherish those who harm us, those who threaten us, as perfect objects of forbearance. So as such, one cultivates a practice to cherish them, not to look at them with anger, not to become averse towards them. So this distinction must be understood. And now, similarly, exploring this further, for example, if there is no object of anger, how exactly would you practice forbearance? So the practice of forbearance itself is dependent on an object of anger. Without an object of anger, the practice of forbearance is impossible. So as such, one needs to learn to cherish the objects of anger, the things that we normally are averse towards, the things that we normally become easily angry towards. We need to not to turn away from them, but to cherish them, to be able to take them on our spiritual path as objects of perfect forbearance.
And yeah, that was what I was thinking actually. But the question was more about how can you practice the things about attachment if you are turning away from them, or
Kijina ko ditsu de tu isere. Gewe lonche lara. Gewe lonche debi jese la digala. Geo tang zo chi chue geo zo lonche la pa pero shenra. Tende nandu ngazu jono lonche se de ngude sang tsini jono lonche la ora. Tanda di lonche la di ti chala de zo marara. Tende we gewe lonche de le di chike geo duwe ge kalo. Kokab chodo chiba. Ra tende gi ndoke gi kansa la digala. Da kanji ge gejola tsumbi kansa ro slora. Geo lonche di lonche de geola tsumbar chibi ge tenchen ro tla shawar ma do nzu tanda jino lonche le ti mare. Tende yi ndoke kansa la ani kansa de tambu ale kola kharin de wala na tabada tan chibu koman de. Tende ani geola lonso chiban de kansa la di tende ji la pa shawra. Di lonche di singu sanje tsuden tuzula shaya mare. Ta tende kansa jese la di tende jese shanchi semba dunzo las ani kharana shimba ganzo nöji ra chi migi kondo la wande cha chedan kondo ngare kharchewan tende nöji dunzo ani pa zuba gomsa yu pena miji ge tsik zubo la waina ko zuba gomsa yu cha gora tende di lonje de ni pechi tu mendo sangdo ko lonje la cha che tsije go la ya do lonje sambarin chi gi tena she sozu nyeba na she zogo la ya da tanda di nöji thangche la da nöji thangche ren che ta sozu le tsik zubo do chi ma mandi ya de ren che tena she chena karela na tela pa zuba gomsa wa
So maybe we can appreciate it more if we read the two lines together. Since any potential source of harm, verse number 27, since any potential source of harm is like a priceless treasure to the Bodhisattva who is eager to enjoy a wealth of virtue. Now herein, wealth is not an object of attachment, as it is in the case of material possession. Herein, wealth refers to the perfect opportunity to cultivate a spiritual practice. So when we come into contact with people who irritates us, who challenges us, who angers us, then we should be able to look at that as a perfect opportunity to cultivate our spiritual practice. So that is what we mean by to enjoy a wealth of virtue. This is not informed by a sense of attachment to this opportunity, but to cherish these kind of challenging situations as a perfect opportunity to cultivate our spiritual practice. This is the attitude that a bodhisattva must cultivate. Does this help to address your question?
Ditsi la tagara de ngazo gi debel lonje la ngazo ye khalore renchi te na jela de sumunda
tiamo di geza ra di gewa gi lonje la dilti
gewa lonje la ani nöji du 아니 늦게 랑 저기 렌치기 때나 시선을 마시 농제도 렌치기 때나 저거 자시 적으려고
So,
I do understand verse 27, like
okay.
I totally get it.
근데 딜라 since any 딜라 since any potential
Mare,
source
ko
of
nishu tsabdin di gocho sonsra da.
Okay.
Ni nishu tsaji de la chua yue like.
Ah, le.
So please.
But I don't understand why they don't see the attachment as also the source of
Harm.
priceless treasure, because you can also learn from it.
Ale.
So yeah, that's
Quran tiwa de din isra. Ani nöche gi yuji ra. O tezo ani nöche gi nöji ra. Tezo da nganzo gi rinchin terna shi ta gorela di nga gotsu gi dusra. Ina da nganzo gi chaba gi docha gi yuji ra. Tela yang rinchin gi terna shi ani tamgo akaresra. 가지나 차박이 유태게 텔라 양스라 아니 수수기 직 냠레라 지엘라 펜토그로 와스
근데 따투나래 지라지버라 먼저 차바글라 지기 때나 했다와이나 단도야 차로 말만데 ኛ드라 내제 검사딜라 nga zuba gomse gi yuyin sanira tin tin jiba santun odra nga zo yang te se reimda khalana 아 착바치스기 유들랑한 단도바가 저기 그 약보 인상 들에 차도 행가다 봐 단내지 땅사기 뱅스는 나불라니들랑한 파야보 인상 투나 데데스 데스다입니다 봐 착바치스기 유들에 단도에 들에 초도 지바 인상 야페도 행가다 잡아 봐 단내바다 아니 시원이 되는 겐더라 봐 세상 백이 뇌지기 시들에 아니 얘기 봐 샹보쳐서 즈바 검사 딘데 유이서네 그니 때진다입니다
So herein, I think it is important to understand the manner in which these attitudes are cultivated in an effort to overcome a particular sense of attachment or aversion. So in order to overcome a sense of aversion that we have, it is important to address that manner in which we turn away from it. So as such, we need to be able to bring an attitude which brings us closer to the object of aversion. Now, as opposed to that, in the relation that we have with the objects of attachment, there already exists a huge element of attachment. And if we begin to cherish, then we project more attachment onto this. And so as such, it doesn't help to pacify, doesn't help to overcome the initial sense of attachment we have. So as such, it's better, if we want to pacify, overcome it, to turn away from it.
understand? Yeah. 봐. 베라바샤는 때때는 이 나라를 지콜었다네. 시 자신으로 이제 취매지 미 아버지 통은 단도디가 그냥 상 거베 사다야라 통다야라 너다야라 지기 상도다 야가 몸부 리비토 산다나. 야 자시 쳐드는 거다. 봐. 따이 그걸 직접으로 지라이나. 땅 얘기 직접으로가 자다 차기 말아. 따디 직접으로들 내 주버공서 유지 차샤사네라. 다 코라인가를 나쁘질라서 이내에 걸 발내로그메 가서 딩이 나라게 주버공서 초도 치바시래 했으면 드니티스 가가다. 그게 늦지다. 그게 유들에 잡아자다. 그게 틀 늦지들라 저기 봐 칼라렌식 때나 sommer 테스트 가가도 통다.
So this is very different, the manner in which we spiritually relate to these different objects. So for example, it might be the case that you are particularly attached to some person, and then you begin to look at that person as almost perfect. In your eyes, they appear perfect, and then if you begin to compound this by growing ever more closer to that object of attachment, then in this you are simply projecting more of your own ideas onto the object, and as such you become all the more attached to your idea of the person and to the person themselves. Now, as opposed to that, if there is a person who speaks very harshly to you, then immediately you do not want to relate to this person. You want to retaliate to this person. And before we begin to retaliate, there is a process wherein you begin to separate yourselves from the other person, saying that this person is someone that I do not like. So as such, if we are to effectively practice forbearance, we need to overcome that attitude first. So that's why it is advised that someone who cultivates bodhicitta as a part of their practice learn to cherish these people as perfect objects of forbearance, cherish these people for giving us the perfect opportunity to cultivate our practice. Yes.
Okay. That's much I
So I hope it's clear now. So even though I address a particular question, I hope that all of you are able to relate to this.
아니 지당한 점장 저한테는 제디 가르네 야보도라 지난주기 도박 가르에는 지 드셔나 짱망신 두고라 지당 남들이 지난주 지그 파기 타자니나 가르 도박을 외워이나 도박 대대는 아주 파생입니다라 아주 디카르 지난 도박제가 상 빼야버라 그러면 아주 걔도 좀 그래 아주 저한테는 가우치 걔도 갈라는 지난주 지기 도나지 집이 따라서 사실 저 그런 말은 잠들이 되는 연애 참아 시비도 야버려. 이네 디 시투고 말아. 때문에 도박으로 많이 됐을 거라. 야제 만도 따라서. 제가 도박지어 디카르 드니실려와이나. 어느 딜레야 세히지라이그야 수수사마다이지라이그. 계속 딜레한테 따다마 보이나. 어제래 미셴발 제가 거가라이그. 대배하고다. 제가 근데 이니까 지난주에 남들 가서 땅에 주신 시바시 다 저한테 디산테 지도 많이 말아. 마신이 디시샤 년이 년 차셔서디 잠잠이 없도 차이다. 잠잠아서 저한테 로치 삼수련에 제대로 되게 아니 로빠찍지 파즈 소설로 또 보면 미신베기 또 봐가나 수수기야 신로야도 또 상편도다. 와 딘델레미네 내가 저한테 지고래. 안 그런데 저한테도 도나치에도 빼고 투치해.
So I really do appreciate questions and doubts that are raised in these sessions because I think it is very, very effective for the general discussion. It not only helps the person who asks this question, it also helps all the other participants to gain clarity. It might be the case that you do not even in your study of the Dharma, when you listen to teachings on the internet and so forth, you might have a lot of doubts and questions, but you do not really find the opportunity to address these doubts and questions. So when we have an opportunity like this course, then maybe it's good to make the most use of it by raising any kind of questions and doubts that we might have. And this is an attitude that my teachers have always advised. When we were young, our teachers always used to encourage us to ask questions, address any kind of doubts that we have. Our teachers used to say that when you do not ask any questions after a discussion, it is either a sign that you understood everything or you didn't understood anything at all. And wherein the first maybe is not a possibility. So if you ask questions, then it is a sign that you are actually paying attention to the discussions. And as such, I encourage all of you to ask any questions and to make sure that any kind of doubts you might have be addressed in these sessions themselves. And even if you do not get a satisfactory answer in these sessions, it gives you further motivation to seek clarity from other sources, and this is a good thing too.
Yeah.
According to the text, to meet someone who hurts you is rare and precious, and you should hold them in high regard as you would a teacher, and make full use of this opportunity. This sounds a bit contradictory to what the society tells you, which is to stay away from the abuser, whether it is physical, verbal, or emotional abuse, and report it so that you can get help because you are a victim. Now I'm wondering if there is synergy between the two approaches, I mean, how would a Buddhist spiritual practitioner find practice material without getting abused?
The moitiva dirt and dinala zawa de zonala sra and sosola nutseda chingera tezola and shingi tambada tagores ra tezola chebar zingores teda and chunyamne che kokap de combo yungores ra tendesungdos in ta dinganzo jigdengi drodanda bet genda chagidus ra chizogi drodandas ra chizonala soso and mikashegi ra semkamgi narjude ne tona sra yana lubu narju tona sra la tematado ani zitegores ra ziteto chegores ani sosotis manya chedo midela napsupo chedo ra zitegores lagioras chido dodan taran ras chezanda dini bara logic genta shitun ra ani dende khari nasra kainsana kisi nangchu nyamne tsid dembaro chego yenasra ani kola jubjan maso nasra ani sosola tsunne 제대겐지 이지미지 고ken라고 지레도스.
대대선에 맞아. 인지비 늦으실래디 트든 동도 켄도데 말라. 저나도 계셔셔다에 나와도 뭐도 거리네 미 제다만일레는 가서 질리도 마대와 세월로 시가. 근데로 시래.
So we don't really need to worry about a lack of material if one is to cultivate spiritual practice, because we are in the face of suffering all the time. So as such, the opportunity to practice spirituality is abundant if we think about it.
제선디 나도 산는 땅땅 자체를 쳐봐라. 배천지 샤와에는 아주 미 땅땅 아주 딜레지 미 숨투 제즈다. 라. 다 미치기 틱 낙보지 라와이나. 미치기 아주 딜레 틱 낙보 쭈부시 라와이나. 찍레코 미시바 가시지 걔만 거는 다스 라거든 남이 땅 두다. 라. 찌기 몇 거는 남이 땅마도 들레마 처음에 걸어 단도 봐 칼라 동야로다 찌 랭로에 터리라. 미기 산노 땅도 제체춘라 제바지다. 다 제세 상시 선보도 야 남상 수술을 찌 만디와데 때지 레슨나 남상 랭로 초조 많이 라. 배나 딜레야 배나라나 다 태용외도 줄을 중화지. 니마 별레도 와지라 아니 라마지 정하는 째. 라. 그 마세 땅도 줘버. 라. 마세 땅도 지다 면다 시로 시리가라. 다 지나티스 구로치야스. 라. 땅도 콜 야포진 라로. 언제는 안데 라투마르 티스 구로치야스. 아니 코랑이 가른데나 아니 되는 지zan라마 투지지 마준도이 디루데인가 말리 따다달라 햄바다 다기 되기 전에 땅와이 있으니 코랑이 딘데위 메시지 쩌니. 라. 다 아니 차나즈면다 제어라 일라레. 땅안저로 오전에 미지면다 제르시나 파직 렌로 칸트도 지기라. 딘데긴데 파샤시. 라. 세상 코랑라 뉴지들레 디마스웨체네 칼로다. 뉴지들레 초드친 지바진제네 아니 틀라팔람사 콜렌로 많이 베체라. 뉴지들레 람사파 콜렌로에 다디 마제니 단도 코랑라 찍스세야데 두야데 다 둥이냐디 나 콜멘다 슈네 나이라. 라. 소체고라. 이네야 딕상노 자체를 가르당라나 나다리 디니 냐야디 심지 셴바데는 양고니 mam부지라 뜻 상메 고치오쇼라라 마친 로이 두두둥글 마야 마르치바 라 마지 심지 타지 로이 디두 둥에 건스 말리 따다달라 메바 딘데 둥에 요도디 ngal tanda tari ngal 메바쇼스라 마디 따다달라 메바 당스 다기 되기 전에 당 nga라 대와다 개와다 카레요 바리 참아 셴라바 당이 대대 아니 로고 대대되면 로고 아니 대와다 덴버 치치레 로고 대대되면 신지라 손다 도주산노 땅도 가서 베트 상일은 대버려시라 와 제가 단단 아저게 로카드 디 쇼를 밀리디가는 겐더를 통데 보라 소소 칼리 가도 좀 되잖아 야 주인님네 갈래 토라.
So now when we look at this, it is important to understand that from a spiritual perspective, motivation and intention is very important, and this has not only implication in our spiritual practice. When we begin to look at how the scope of motivation and how the nature of intention that we have has a consequence, has an effect in the manner in which we face challenges, then it becomes clear. For example, in this group, in this gathering, there are 8 people, and then if I address this group very negatively, then there is different reactions to the same kind of verbal abuse, so to say. Some people are able to ignore it. Some people have a stark reaction to it, very strong reaction to it. Some people are able to think about it carefully. Does it really apply to me or not? So what dictates the nature of reaction that we have towards such a situation? It's exactly the motivation or the intention, the scope of the intention to be able to accommodate the possibilities. And now, this is a small example that the intention or the motivation can have a huge impact on the manner, on our reaction to a particular situation. Now, when this is a small example. Now, if we sometimes think that maybe this is not so practical and realistic and so forth, then maybe if you hear the story about a Tibetan monk, an elderly Tibetan monk who was imprisoned by the Chinese, and it is said that the Chinese decided to kill him, and when the moment came that he was about to be shot, even after all these years of imprisonment, through his practice, even at the moment of death, he didn't express any sense of resentment or any sense of anger. Even before the moment he was shot, he was calm enough to request them to allow him a moment to recite a prayer. And it is said that this monk recited this prayer, that with this act of transgression that you are about to commit, upon me, may all the negative karmas that all sentient beings have accumulated be ripened upon me in this very moment. And then he decisively faced death. So this is the kind of effect that the motivation or the intention can have in our reaction to situations that even at the face of death, you are able to face it with courage, with compassion, with love.
Chidai migi sanna tandala be jachelu chibadwa, right? Shanshu sema maine nga mi human do jile kashi lalamsa pho de ni do kashi ni be ai kya ma nami tang thu ni do kai twa ra kashi ni ya di o kya ma ko din lagwe jinse dine san tang thu do milunda mligda ra chidang nga zamzo loi lo ma shu o da nga zo ji na che la de su chung chang chang khde do ji na chon ye yu sigre kashi na ya la de che thu na de pe re samne samsu dam yu cho ra.
So human beings have different inclinations, different propensities. So as such, they have different motivations, different scopes of motivations. So it is perfectly okay that we have different reactions to similar situations. This is a fact of reality, and as such, I think it is important not to look at the Buddhist practices as practices which is geared towards always being at the receiving end of abuse, being at the receiving end of hurt, harm, and so forth. Maybe that's not the attitude that a Buddhist cultivates. Even in the face of harm, hurt, and so forth, the Buddhist trains in shaping their motivation to be able to accommodate, to be able to face this. That's the Buddhist approach. So, are there any further questions, or should we continue? Oh, okay, you have a question.
Verse 29. I wasn't getting the four forms.
Okay, so first we talk about three realms: desire realm, form realm and formless realms. And desire realm is us, wherein all our activities or our motivations are shaped by a sense of desire. And then form and formless realms, as the name suggests, formless realm, one doesn't have any, in these kind of realms, when you take birth, one does not have any kind of form, physical form. And form and formless realm pertains to levels of gods, still within the samsaric existence. Thangbo nganzogi the kam sume zume la di dishi jara ani dezoya ani khoa na la yoresra. So now when we are talking about absorptions, it is talking about meditative absorptions. Okay? Meditative stabilization, meditative equipoise. And now absorption herein refers to samadhi, being totally absorbed in a meditative state. So it is said that if one is to take birth in the desire realm, and if one is to take birth in what is called the upper realms of the desire realm, humans, deity and gods, there are gods who are within the desire realm too. So as such, one must cultivate ethical conduct. The cause is ethical conduct. But to take birth in the form and formless realms, one must cultivate shamatha. That's the cause which impels us to be born. So as such, in these realms, the gods, so to say, abide in totally being absorbed in meditative states. But still, they are not free from afflictions. So, in these form and formless realms, there are different meditative states wherein you become totally absorbed. So, in the formless realm, there are 4 such meditative states wherein the gods or the practitioner becomes totally absorbed in. 4 states of samadhi. Tasam tisona nanzugita shi nishu tsagu jiora.
Shindira
Nyamsha shibulet.
Shindira de dubil hadon ki isra. Nyumon namar jombe. Shichini. Zumi shidang zumi shile yangta debai.
Oh, di sume shi.
Sume
shi la di dishi jaro nanda ala girta koi.
Samden shide zumi. Nangkita nangkata chemi. Chidang dadi zumi shile de dadi chidang nganzu samsu nala pe trajibuti hira. Chidang to ko devoshina korangi choaro shi legi sara. Samden gomdi digalwa. Tibena tilara. Nanghe thai. Nanghe tar thai so le tindechi ra. Nanghe thai nangka thai le digala pide nangka nangse jachembo soso tongsang rochi tindegira. Nanghe thai nangke chiyam mele digala lo le chiyam mashawa ra jingjam tindedo tindechi. Nanghe thai nangka thai chiyam sikze le digala ta nganzo gi chi khoagi chemu thale bit khoraya ta tok ro de la ra tindechi.
So these 4 formless absorptions, now we understand, are meditative states, and these are distinct in the meditative experience, in the absorption. So in the first formless absorption, the meditative experience is one of boundless space itself. So as such, it is called the limitless space formless absorption. Then in the second, the meditative experience is boundless consciousness, boundless mind, boundless consciousness. The experience is that the consciousness itself begins to feel as if it's limitless, boundless. And then in the third formless absorption, no appearance. Now in the consciousness, in the meditative, in the practitioner's experience of meditation, nothing appears now. So as such, when nothing appears, they are able to abide in a deep meditative state. No particular experience, nothing appears at all, no objects. And now, after that, then you arrive at the tip of samsara. Now at this point, it's an experience that now you're on the verge of being liberated. You're still not liberated, you're on the tip of samsara. So as such, it is called the formless absorption of the tip or the top of samsara. So maybe we continue with the text a bit and pick up the questions later on.
Arangi tuba rangi matana chebe zuji cheme chesipe teshi junda rangi tuba la tane pongwa jesela yisra ta rangi tuba rangi mata chesang ta susu ge ngaran zu ge lo loba lo tuna jura susu taji majena ngayang taba yin samne ra mi changma gi disang wada ni de disha pai de dimila ngatu pa zu zu de pele ra susu gi chen la tsu taji cheni da Tiskali khabare chesa dinde mata wa pha janjan zgu chu de na rangi thuba de rangi mata wa ina taji maje na ani chuba indo do je gomje ni indo de che che ni ni indo de chira chebe gi zunye do khidi na ya ta dina mi ja chore ji khasar tha ani khari no chora che chi ni nyamni ba ji indo do chine chebe zuji cheme chesi be la digala susugi notu do sana che ma da pha janjan chu de na ngozo che chi ni gomje ni che shi ni ni la wa ina ya 아니 제 마인 바이 제시그레스 라 근데 인디가 대시를 주는데 근데 인상 뒤따더라 예 가르이네야 뒤따더 랑기 투바라서 노툴라스 아니 따니 소 따지지 계속 노여나 대바 뽕와데 예시 상주선부터 냠네레스
Now moving on, verse number 31st. The practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to scrutinize oneself continually and to rid oneself of faults whenever they appear. For unless one checks carefully to find one's own confusion, one might appear to be practicing Dharma but act against it. Now, this is a very practical advice that we as human beings have an attitude that we are blameless in situations, that we are perfect. And as such, we have a habit of always finding faults in others, always finding something negative outside of ourselves, wherein we ourselves or want to protect our own image of being perfect and blameless. Now, in the cultivation of our spiritual practice, it is always important to observe our own minds continually, to rid oneself, to overcome, rid oneself of faults, to overcome any kind of delusions, any kind of illusions that we might have about ourselves. And as such, unless and until we make it a point to observe our own minds, our own attitudes, our own actions at all times, even though outwardly we might keep an appearance of practicing spirituality, but if we fail to do this, if we fail to look at ourselves all the time, then in effect we might not really be practicing spirituality. We might be totally act against spiritual principles.
시장이 가는서 가려나 지금 아제지 지도 라 밀어 콘도로 라운드 또 라 저도 가려는 가디 콘디문들네 안가도랑 거라 나 스스 노트 하고나 다미 베드 한번 잡아주면은 스스 노트 좀 하고 노트 참아에는 밀어 빠시 쇼주 지금 말하다 나 누자 하지도 지지 예시거든 라 세상 안저기 뒤뒤 가는 점점 밀어 가지로 라운드 가서 스스로 따지지 뺏기지 니 노트도 니 오늘 거라 나리도 코르도 sam 밀다 계셔보다
So generally when we look at the moments when our arrogance is the most strongest, then we need to investigate where exactly does this arrogance come from. It comes from an attitude wherein we begin to say that I am not in the wrong, the others are in the wrong. So as such, you begin to develop a strong sense of arrogance. And it is almost impossible to develop a strong sense of arrogance when we begin to learn to acknowledge our own mistakes, our own faults, unless and until you are someone who has no sense of ethics at all, then in these moments when you learn to accept your own faults and mistakes, then it is impossible to kind of become arrogant about ourselves. So as such, even when we become strongly arrogant, when there are moments when there is strong arrogance in ourselves, it is important to always learn to look at ourselves, whether we are at fault, whether we are part of the problem or not.
Ta di soni pa de khara nyomo angi jese jinda las nyeba lina dani nyangjuwe theba chela shubi kansa ki nyeba mama jese la le yisla ra ta zo di kalo la na zo pe na ngara zo ro na chi mi shimba ge kyen da de he de na susu di pasaro ra phagila ne mi ha go me de soso le tende di pasa soso na do ma ta soso ge na do ma ta ma de mi shimba la nga zo gi ta ko ya bo ya ma ji la na mi shimba la nga zo nam to chung da ra nandi mi chambo ya bo ni na kuni ndamling a mi shimba de la phagi di chona gi chambo che sa mi ya bo ya ma ji la na di sani de ko la tok pa da nam do da e ko kare chen chi mandi ya thong de su shi da ra tindi nga zo khai la gi di ne chen ro ha ko da 디제 다 단다 딜라 카르라고서는 뇨모 안기 있어라 소소기 다라주 데샤샤나 티모 근데 뇨모 안기 제세 신달라 베네 상주서 마신다 신라 somra 제세 젠다기 녜발라나 코 만디 파다 근데 지다 요시워라 지체나 소소기 트나게 왕게야 통시워라 근데 길링라나 셰데와 라 셰데와이나 다니 냠도 소소 소노 조야다 소소라 칼라다 미기 통이나 셰도나 마 냠야라 오 딘데 지도그레스 tel habada khasana theba chela shubi khansaki sosogi sosol memba inare sosol dawodo inare tanda dikala zo khasana theba chembolo shubi khansa rangle habe chibu yendeje wa tindege chi gomru nyale tsishin chini ta khanda chibu chembo duzula ani soso khatana dile diba ma chidangi nimi chamala de chi nyeba no ling de diba res tanda dikaps karshe wona chibu chembo duzula ani kharo tang migi yende da migi tokba ngaz khaju hago marwa tindela ani ngaz ling de na ani chibu chela shubi kansaki yinba mima tende maya yo maresra tende yede maya kadon che de yese shangju semba to zogi nyamne res.
Now, verse number 32, the practice of all the bodhisattvas is to never to speak ill of others who have embarked upon the greater vehicle. For if under the influence of destructive emotions I speak of other bodhisattvas' failings, it is I who am at fault. Now, generally, it is important that not just with regards to our discussion about bodhisattvas and realized beings, even generally in our interactions with others, in our relations with others, it is important that without appreciating the good qualities of others, if we begin to simply always look out for faults in others, then this is not really good at all. We need to be able to appreciate others' good qualities, and then on the basis of that we can begin to offer constructive criticism. As opposed to this, without any appreciation for the good qualities that people have, then if you begin to simply look for their mistakes, their faults all the time, then it's not really effective and beneficial at all. Now, more particularly with regards to spiritual practitioners who truly dedicate themselves to their practice, spiritual practitioners who have embarked on the greater vehicle, which is the Mahayana path. So, if we do not have any understanding of their practice, if we do not have any true appreciation of their spiritual practice, then it is ill-advised to speak ill of them or to point out their faults if we do not understand their spiritual practice. Because it is indeed the case that we cannot really be effective judges of the spiritual realizations and the spiritual realizations of others, because this is not something that is easily recognized. When we do not know the kind of spiritual practice that they have dedicated themselves towards, then it is ill-advised to kind of point out their faults when we do not know them well.
다 숨주 소소 받라들라다 녀구왕가 소소라 녀바다 그때 되네라 아니 다 녀발라디 지주노노제라 그때라도 소소라 구셔제라 된대기 왕기스 아니 펜션 쯔지르 먼저 지게 증링셔서 시드네라 시치신스 아니 든저 칼라나 퇴선 공배 겨와 냠반저 근데 아니 시 된데라 때는 아니 가나 저거 지 해발하니 내 퇴선 검사에 가르게 진 검루 냠에 가르 제와이네 더좀만 냠주서기 유대스라 냠주왜 근데 아니 자시 소소기 지게 조보 조모 가르이느라 근데기 조보 조모다 근데기 자시기 침당 아니 연다기 침 소소라 지 남디 세그 떠모주 때되니게 연다기 침나라 아니 콘졸라다 지기 주마이 비지 드타비 아니 차신도 뽕와데 제세 상주선부터 저 냠네레스라라 다소솔라 남디 로바 첸치다이네 가저 틀에 야부체나 팔라 야부체고데 틀에 신차 쳇잖아 아니 소소게 곰루 냠네도 저 냠래 이마타보 콘조이 모퉁디고 근데 소주 마레스라 그래서 차신 뽕와데 제세라네.
Now moving on, 33rd. The practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to let go of attachment to the households of benefactors and of family and friends, since one's study, reflection and meditation will all diminish when one quarrels and competes for honors and rewards. Now, this is especially true with regards to spiritual practitioners who have benefactors, sponsors, who help them, and family and friends who support their spiritual practice. If the practitioner themselves grow attached to their sponsors, to the friends and families who support them, then the practitioner loses their focus. Rather than dedicating their time and effort towards study, practice and reflection and meditation, then one begins to become consumed by a sense of concern about appeasing, pleasing these sponsors, these friends and family, looking for a sense of validation from these sponsors, these friends and family.
숨주 소시바디 칼라나 줌무치게 yensen 투치르진이스라 먼저게 다 참말로잖아 예외세지 쮸바 냥주로에 대시 yen지 있어 예도 모위 치츠봉와 제세라이네 예슬라 당한도 돈다 도도도 치츠보 방고와 됐던 거래 근데 줌무기 치디 간대요라나 줌무치기 yensen 투바 스정한도 치츠보지 표시 당와이나 셴미 셈발흘로 전에 데딘지네 콜 치츠보디 고운디가 생생데 마데와 직 투도야로 라 먼저 좀 치츠보지 거는 집으면다 아 됐다 켄자레라에도 리고라 이네 치클 천점에서 니가 돈베께서 질리기도 라 딘데로체 아니 디 칼라나 예외세지 쭈수의 냠로레스 딘데기 치츠보 표시 당와이나 예세 상주선비 쭈바도 되는 말 시시 도와야 보여라 뒤에 냠로레스 대신 yen지 예도 모위 아니 딘데기 치츠도는 하와드네나 미셴바기 수설을 따와이나 예도 모아 지가 앞에 두자도 코치 주부 배치 두 배치 당도 야보 민들라기 딘데기 유차도 그래스 딘데 인장 딘데기 치츠도 뽕와데 예세 상시 선바도 저기 아니 냠네레스.
Now 34th. Now it talks about not engaging in harsh words. The practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to avoid harsh words, which others might find unpleasant or distasteful, since abusive language upsets the minds of others and thereby undermines a Bodhisattva's conduct. So a Bodhisattva's conduct is supposed to be informed and motivated by love, compassion, and so forth. And if one engages in harsh and abusive language, then this totally undermines the Bodhisattva's conduct. And it is important to appreciate the effect that words have on other people's mind, because a simple word can really disturb other people's minds. In Tibetan, we have a saying that A word, even though might appear harmless, is like a weapon that can break the heart into 1,000 different pieces. So as such, we must be really mindful of the speech that we engage in to ensure that these are not harsh and these do not disturb other people's mind.
ndo pena ngazu chi sembal hele do chi u chinde na mi chi tsu tsu la na ngazu lamsa chi u di me ba so she dra ani sembal nalo chi u me ba so zamza kashi gi namju ga la ya ngazu chi u me ba thong hong gu da de cha ro da sik de pe namju ngazu me le ke che she da na re khanji na te zo zo pe ki sham da di pas ni khane sa ha um da.
So we really need to be careful, and I think we can relate to this, that if we are really not mindful with our speech, then it has really negative consequences. For example, right now we are all calm in a gathering like this, and if someone utters a totally someone utters some really harsh words right now, then I'm sure like all of us become a little bit distressed, disturbed. So that's the effect that words can have. So as such, it is important to pay attention to our speech at all times.
다 심지 성가 빠디 칼라나 요모 곰나 나란자 때페나 샤나마서도 곰을 페 딜라 곰디체와 있나라 아니 녀부 페나 가서 디 되차게 녀부 무드바 고메 아니 가르사 컨트롤 녀부 샴바 고마 라 아니 팀무 녀부 텐데 곰바 딘도 텐데 녀부도 저기 도 가고 차르 가서 곰 베도 곰바 쳇잖아 녀부 때네 도 가고 텐데 차이레스 텐데 인자 다 먼저 디바 도야라 가서 남주 남자 제데 생데 숭구디가라 템바다 시즌 라이라 텐데위 템바다 시즌도 가르스나 도주 님부체 아니 도주기파 춘춘찬나시 라 페나 가서 파기라 지기 다로 근데 정거에는 가서라 춘춘셔고다 텐데 대시도 저기 가서 로도 가도 아니 차도 모서도 막 간데스 정부터 되가라 아니 춘찬나시 텐데 이 춘순에 다 간다 디소소 대시 바위 때네스라 아니 차소 뇨모 당부르지마다 제가 템바데 시즌이 통고 다 템베기 간도 딜래야 야네 시즌이 잘하지 템바 타바다 먼저로도 가도 근데 째원 남사 잘하지네 파텐츠는 따단 디바가나 샤고 하지라 된 차소 뇨모 째마타 남사 친주지 째운데가 남사 맞죠마다 남사 님부터 돼야 돼 아니 패키지 버렸으라 디마도에나 아니 질레야 이제 친구 차서나 가르카보다 배는 간주 메데 마선데 친주지 바우데가 메세와이나 레라보다 매 전부 차선 아니 백 가래가고 강바청 어찌도다 세상 저기 차다모서 춘주지 온데는 막 네트워크 쪽으로마도 대체를 개발 차선 아니 소소 남이 부투투야 아니 lumba 제거도 배야 쳇두다 지 컨트롤을 다 잡아야 다가라를 내고라 제가 근데 이 분종 집에 제세라네 이래디가 근데 이 녀모도 손에 째마타도 남서 맞자마서야 봐 대 아니 제세 상주 선바도 냠네레스.
Now moving on, 35th. The practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to slay attachment and the rest, mind's afflictions, at once, the very moment they arise, taking as weapons the remedies held with mindfulness and vigilance. For once the kleshas herein refers to the afflictions. For once the afflictions have become familiar, they will be harder to avert. So, when we look at the last line, for once the afflictions have become familiar, they will be harder to avert. So, if we become totally habituated, if our habitual tendencies become totally informed by the afflictions, then it will be very difficult to overcome them. That is what the last line means. That if we become totally habituated, that it becomes a part of our habit to give in to these afflictions when they arise, then they will be very hard to overcome, very hard to address later on. So as such, the practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to confront, to slay attachment, anger and ignorance the moment they arise, taking as weapons the remedies, the antidotes. So for example, with attachment, one needs to cultivate meditation on ugliness of the object of desire. Then with regards to anger or aversion, one begins to meditate on love, forbearance, and compassion. And in as an antidote to ignorance, one begins to cultivate meditation on interdependence, how all things come to be because of causes and conditions. And to be able to confront these afflictions the moment they arise, and apply their particular antidotes with the support of mindfulness and vigilance. So in all facets of our practice, in all aspects of our lives, it is important that we develop the quality of awareness, of mindfulness and vigilance, to be able to observe what exactly goes on into our mind, to be able to become aware and vigilant of the moment when these afflictions arise within our mind stream. Yes.
Yeah, the passion to the courage.
So then, what are the 6 great perfections? She wants to ask, hear from you. Yeah.
Generosity, wisdom, diligence, meditative concentration in general.
The Gurim districts in Egypt.
Jemba, Tsitun, Zoba, Tsundu, Samden, Shirap.
So it's helpful to kind of list them out in this order: generosity, ethical conduct, forbearance, joyous effort, concentration or meditative stabilization, and then finally wisdom.
Is there any meaning for the order?
Tene digi rimbado jora kurimdo de jimbathang bongwen do dogoba ra sujim jine dogoba tendela ani gobado mise yorobes.
Tata chita kari nyamni chita chebada eji mara ina chita nga tu pecha nama shedi gala jembangela shera jemba tsuru zoba tsandu mara shera ina ya ta nekam nga tu kari ki nyamni che kogabra na ko che shena digar sam ra inji minji tongbo jemba che ane shini zoba kamla hande nga tu katu chige kalor nyamni che se yuji tu na che ra.
So there is no special purpose as such to the order of the list, because whenever we find the opportunity to practice any of these, we should be able to practice them. It should not be the case that we say that I will practice generosity only first and only then I will train in ethical conduct. That's not the case at all. Okay, then we stop here and break for lunch. Tene koy di ji ke ja trigger. Tanda nganzo khasan chaja nala chundu da ji chogi